He started with nothing. No family wealth, no connections, no safety net. By 40, he controlled 90% of all oil in America. By 50, he was the wealthiest human being who had ever lived. This is not luck. This is a blueprint. The story of John D. Rockefeller and the empire that changed the world. Ohio, 1839. A boy is born into a family, barely surviving. His father, a con artist, a cheat, a man with two families. Devil Bill Rockefeller taught his son one thing: trust no one. Young John kept every cent, every single cent. He tracked every penny at age 12. Discipline before ambition. He gave 10% of every paycheck to charity since age 16. School didn't hold him. He wanted to build something real. At 16, he hit every business in Cleveland looking for work. 3 months of rejection. Every morning, he came back. The 26th of September 1855, he got his first job as a bookkeeper. He called it Job Day. He celebrated it every year until he died. First paycheck, 50 cents a day. He saved every penny. He wasn't just doing the job, he was studying the entire business. One obsession drove him daily. I am bound to be rich. Not, I want to be rich. Bound. Inevitable. Decided. At 18, he borrowed $1,000 from his father at 10% interest. He launched his first business, a produce trading company. Partner, Maurice Clark. Chemistry, none. Business sense, razor sharp. The Civil War hit America. Rockefeller hit the jackpot. Armies needed supplies. Rockefeller supplied them all. Profit by 1,862. $17,000, nearly $500,000 in today's money. But produce was slow. Oil was the future. He felt it first. Pennsylvania, 1,859. Oil was discovered. The world would never be the same. Everyone rushed to drill. Rockefeller went to refine. Drillers gambled, refiners controlled. He understood the difference. His first refinery, built in 1863, small, efficient, relentless. He used sulfuric acid to purify crude oil into clean kerosene. Kerosene lit America's homes. Demand was infinite. Clark wanted out. Rockefeller refused to let go. Auction day. Rockefeller bid $2,500. He owned it all. He was 26. He now controlled the largest refinery in Cleveland. Next move, bring in Henry Flagler, a man who thought like him. Together, they had one shared vision: total control of oil. The 10th of January 1870, Standard Oil Company was born. Standard. It wasn't a name. It was a declaration of war. Rockefeller understood something no competitor did. The real power in oil wasn't in the ground. It was in the pipes, the rails, and the refineries that moved it. His first strategic weapon, railroad rebates. He negotiated secret discounts of 50 to 75% with the Erie Railroad while competitors paid full price. While Standard Oil shipped oil for half the cost, every competitor bled money on every single barrel they moved across the country. But Rockefeller went further. He negotiated drawbacks. His competitors' shipping fees were partially redirected back to him. He was paid to defeat them. This wasn't competition. This was systematic elimination. Rockefeller had turned the rules of the game into weapons that only he could use. Cleveland, 1872. Rockefeller forms the South Improvement Company, a secret alliance between Standard Oil and the major railroads designed to crush every small refiner. The deal was brutal in its simplicity. Join Standard Oil or face shipping rates so high your business dies within months. No exceptions. The Cleveland Massacre. In just 3 months of 1872, Rockefeller bought out 22 of the 26 refineries in Cleveland. His competitors called it a conquest. Some sold willingly, others fought, but nearly all eventually surrendered. When you can't compete on cost, there is no alternative. He paid fairly, sometimes generously, but the choice was never really a choice. You joined his empire or you disappeared. Word of the South Improvement Company leaked. Newspapers exploded. Pennsylvania oil producers went on strike. Even Congress launched an investigation. Rockefeller dissolved the South Improvement Company publicly. Privately, he continued every practice that had made it so effective. The strategy never stopped, only the name changed. By 1873, Standard Oil refined 10,000 barrels a day, more than any other company in the world. Cleveland was his. Now, he wanted everything else. His next target, the Pennsylvania Railroad, the most powerful transportation company in America. Its president, Tom Scott, was not a man who yielded easily. Scott controlled 6,000 miles of rail. He was funding a competing pipeline that could break Standard Oil's stranglehold on transportation across the entire East Coast. Rockefeller's counterattack was devastating. He threatened to build his own railroad. Then he began secretly buying stock in every railway that could bypass Pennsylvania. Standard Oil moved 2 million barrels a day away from Pennsylvania rail onto competitor lines. The revenue loss for Scott was catastrophic. September 1873, Black Thursday. The U.S. economy collapsed into its worst depression to date. Tom Scott's railroad empire was on the edge of ruin. Scott begged for help. He turned to Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie turned him down flat. Rockefeller watched both men struggle and made no move to save either. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877. Workers rose up against pay cuts. Violence swept the country. The government called in the army. Tom Scott never recovered. With Pennsylvania rail broken, Rockefeller moved to control transportation himself. Standard Oil began building its own pipeline network across multiple states. This was vertical integration before anyone had a name for it. Own the well, the pipe, the refinery, the barrel, the shipping route, and the retailer. He even built his own barrel factories and his own tank cars. Every cent of profit that once went to suppliers now stayed inside the empire. By 1877, Standard Oil controlled over 90% of all refining capacity in the United States. One man, one company, one industry. But the Ohio oil fields were producing a new problem: sulfurous crude so foul-smelling it was called skunk oil. The market refused to buy it at any price. Every competitor abandoned Ohio oil. Rockefeller hired chemists and gave them one instruction: solve it. His team discovered a lime-based process that eliminated the sulfur completely, transforming worthless Ohio crude into premium-grade kerosene cheaper than anything Pennsylvania could produce. Ohio oil was abundant and cheap. Now that Standard could refine it, Rockefeller had essentially created a monopoly within a monopoly. 1882, the Standard Oil Trust. A legal structure so innovative that it rewrote American corporate law, one entity secretly controlling 40 corporations across 14 states. On paper, 40 independent companies. In reality, one brain, one strategy, one master, John D. Rockefeller. It was corporate camouflage at a scale never seen before. Rockefeller's personal stake in this trust, 30%. His net worth in 1882 was already incomprehensible, and the empire was still growing. His operational genius: he ran Standard Oil like a military campaign. Weekly reports from every subsidiary, real-time intelligence on every competitor. Nothing happened without his knowledge. He had informants inside competing companies. He knew their prices before they were announced. He knew their clients before they were signed. His pricing strategy was surgical: drop prices in a competitor's market to below cost. Absorb the losses with profits from monopoly regions. Kill the competitor, raise prices. This was predatory pricing, a concept not yet named or illegal. Rockefeller invented the playbook that antitrust laws would later be written to prevent. Meanwhile, his rivalry with Andrew Carnegie was intensifying. Carnegie ruled steel. Rockefeller held something Carnegie needed desperately: the Mesabi Iron Range in Minnesota. The Mesabi Range held the largest iron ore deposits ever discovered. Carnegie needed it to feed his steel mills. Rockefeller had quietly bought it all. Rockefeller threatened to build his own steel mills using Mesabi ore. Carnegie, for the first time, was the one facing existential threat from a competitor. J.P. Morgan stepped in to broker a deal. He bought Rockefeller's iron mines and Carnegie's steel company to create U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation in history. Rockefeller's payment: $88.5 million for the Mesabi mines, equivalent to $3.1 billion today. Not bad for ore he bought when no one else recognized its value. By 1900, Rockefeller's personal fortune exceeded $200 million, nearly 2% of the entire U.S. GDP. No individual in American history had ever held this proportion of the national wealth. He owned refineries in every major city. He owned pipelines crossing 14 states. He owned the ships, the rail cars, the warehouses. The octopus had tentacles everywhere. His political influence matched his financial power. Senators, governors, and judges across the country were on Standard Oil's payroll or owed favors that couldn't be refused. He didn't buy politicians. He invested in them. And like all his investments, he expected a return. But absolute power creates absolute enemies. Across America, small business owners, farmers, workers, and journalists were watching Standard Oil consume everything in its path. The press turned on him. A single headline in the Times-Union described Standard Oil as the most cruel, impudent, pitiless, and grasping monopoly that ever fastened upon a country. Rockefeller ignored the press until one journalist refused to be ignored: Ida Tarbell. Her father had been destroyed by Standard Oil. She had waited 20 years to return the favor. Tarbell spent 5 years documenting every secret deal, every predatory tactic, every political bribe of Standard Oil. Her investigation became the most important piece of journalism in American business history. The history of the Standard Oil Company was published in McClure's magazine in 190419 parts over 2 years. America read every word. The public verdict was unanimous: guilty. Theodore Roosevelt had just entered the White House with one mission: break the trusts. Standard Oil was the most visible target in America. The Department of Justice filed suit against Standard Oil under the Sherman Antitrust Act. The legal battle that followed lasted 7 years and reached the Supreme Court of the United States. Rockefeller never testified, never showed fear. He played golf every day during the trial, projecting absolute calm while his lawyers fought the battle of the century. The 15th of May, 1911, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously: Standard Oil must be dissolved. Broken into 34 separate companies, the greatest monopoly in American history was over. The world expected Rockefeller to be ruined. Instead, the breakup made him richer. Each of the 34 companies he still owned shares in, and together, they were worth far more than Standard Oil had ever been. Among the 34 companies born from Standard Oil of New Jersey, which became Exxon; Standard Oil of New York, which became Mobil; Standard Oil of California, which became Chevron. The monopoly that the government broke apart became the foundation of the modern global oil industry. Rockefeller won the battle, and inadvertently, he also won the war. By 1913, his personal fortune reached $900 million. Adjusted for today, that is approximately $340 billion, making him the wealthiest individual in modern human history. For context, at his peak, Rockefeller's wealth represented 1.5% of the entire U.S. economy. No tech billionaire, no hedge fund titan today comes close to that proportion. But the question that haunted the last 40 years of his life was not about money, it was about legacy. What do you do when you own more than any human being can ever spend? The public hated him. Newspapers vilified him. Children were taught his name as a synonym for greed. Rockefeller, now in his 70s, decided it was time to write a different chapter. He hired a public relations expert, Ivy Lee, the first major PR campaign in American history. The strategy: show the real Rockefeller, the man who had given away millions since age 16. He began distributing dimes to every child he met on the street. Photographers followed. The image of the generous old billionaire spread across the country. But it wasn't just image management. In 1913, he created the Rockefeller Foundation, one of the most impactful philanthropic organizations in history, funded with $100 million at launch. The foundation funded the eradication of hookworm disease in the American South, a parasitic infection that had kept millions in poverty and illness for generations. He funded the University of Chicago, contributing over $35 million across his lifetime, helping transform it into one of the world's premier research institutions. Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research today, known as Rockefeller University, pioneered treatments for diseases that had killed millions. His money funded the science that saved lives. In total, Rockefeller and his son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., gave away more than $1 billion combined at a time when $1 billion was an almost unfathomable sum. He built libraries. He funded churches of every denomination. He subsidized schools for Black Americans in the South during an era when racial equality was not a popular cause. He said, "I was a soldier of God, and I was given money for the benefit of mankind." Whether you believe him or not, the results speak for themselves. His doctor had warned him at 53, "Change your lifestyle, or you will die within a year." Rockefeller responded by restructuring his entire diet, schedule, and stress levels, and lived to 97. He spent the last 45 years of his life in retirement at his estate in Pocantico Hills, New York, playing golf, tending gardens, and giving away money with the same discipline he had once used to accumulate it. He died on the 23rd of May 1937, at age 97. His last words, according to those present, were to his nurses, "I thank the Lord for all his blessings." The most powerful man in American history left quietly. What did Rockefeller leave behind? Not just money, not just companies. He left a template for how one individual can fundamentally reshape an entire industry, an economy, and a nation. Standard Oil's 34 successor companies went on to dominate global energy for a century. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, BP's Atlantic Richfield, all born from one man's vision in 1870. The Rockefeller Foundation is still active today, with assets exceeding $5 billion, funding global health, food security, and economic development across 100-plus countries. Rockefeller University has produced 26 Nobel Prize winners. The medical breakthroughs funded by his original $1 million donation in 1901 are still saving lives 125 years later. So, what is the real lesson of John D. Rockefeller? Not that ruthlessness wins plenty of ruthless men died broke. The lesson is about systems thinking at a scale that no one else could imagine. Lesson 1. He never competed on the field. He competed on the infrastructure. When everyone else fought for market share, he built the roads, pipes, and railways those markets depended on. Lesson 2. He turned information into advantage. Real-time intelligence on pricing, competitors, and market movements gave Standard Oil an edge no amount of capital alone could buy. Lesson 3. He understood that financial discipline at every scale is non-negotiable. From his first 50-cent paycheck to a $900 million fortune, he never spent what he didn't need to spend. Lesson 4. He recognized that a monopoly is only sustainable if it provides genuine value. When Standard Oil's quality and price advantages disappeared under public scrutiny, so did its political protection. Lesson 5. He pivoted faster than anyone, from produce to oil refining, from refining to pipelines, from Ohio crude to skunk oil chemistry. Every pivot was data-driven, not emotional. These aren't lessons from a textbook. They are lessons from a man who built the largest private business empire the world has ever seen and who gave most of it back. In 2026, the oil industry Rockefeller built still generates over $3 trillion in annual global revenue. The company structures he pioneered are the template for every major corporation today. The antitrust laws that were written to stop him, the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, are now the legal framework that governs every market economy on the planet. Even his enemies built him monuments. The very regulations created to fight him became the rulebook of modern capitalism. Rockefeller shaped the world even in defeat. Think about what Rockefeller saw that others missed when he entered the oil industry in 1863. Not a resource, but a system waiting to be controlled at every link in its chain. His competitors saw oil wells. He saw a logistics network. His competitors saw refineries. He saw pricing power. His competitors saw products. He saw infrastructure moats. This is the mental model that separates builders of empires from operators of businesses. Always ask, what controls the system? Not, how do I win today? But, who owns tomorrow? Rockefeller built his empire in an era without computers, without global capital markets, without the internet. He did it with a ledger book, a relentless work ethic, and a vision that refused to be small. He was not a perfect man. The families destroyed in the Cleveland Massacre, the workers who never shared in Standard Oil's extraordinary profits, their stories are part of this legacy too. A complete assessment of Rockefeller requires holding both truths simultaneously: the man who built more than anyone and the man who destroyed more than most to do so. But history doesn't remember the men who played it safe. It remembers the men who changed the world for better or for worse, and sometimes for both at once. Every entrepreneur today who studies supply chain dominance, vertical integration, or market consolidation is studying, directly or indirectly, the playbook that John D. Rockefeller wrote in the 1870s. The private equity firms that buy industries to control their supply chains, the tech giants that acquire competitors before they become threats, Rockefeller invented those playbooks 150 years ago. The difference between Rockefeller at 20 and the average entrepreneur at 20: he wasn't trying to make money. He was trying to understand how power accumulates. Money was merely the scoreboard. He understood early that in every industry, a small number of choke points determine who wins. Control the choke points: pricing, logistics, quality, information, and you control everything else. His discipline with money was equally legendary. He never speculated. Every investment had a clear strategic purpose. He didn't chase returns, he manufactured them by controlling conditions. He also understood the power of patience. The Misabi iron ore mines sat idle for years before he needed them as leverage against Carnegie. He had bought them in anticipation of a battle not yet visible. This is long-game thinking at its highest level, accumulating assets whose strategic value won't be apparent for years because you've already mapped the endgame while others are still playing the opening. His relationship with Henry Flagler also offers a key lesson. He built his inner circle with extreme care. Flagler wasn't just a partner. He was a man who shared Rockefeller's exact vision, work ethic, and obsession with efficiency. Rockefeller famously said, "A friendship founded on business is better than a business founded on friendship." He meant it. Every relationship in his empire was strategic first. For modern entrepreneurs, the question isn't, how do I copy Rockefeller? The question is, in my industry, right now, where are the choke points? Who controls the infrastructure? And is it me? His health philosophy is equally instructive. At 53, when a doctor warned him he would die within a year without radical change, he changed completely, decisively, without hesitation. The same adaptability he showed in business, pivoting from produce to oil, from oil to pipelines, from pipelines to diversification, he applied to his own body and mind. He was not born with exceptional talent. He was not a charismatic leader. He was not a brilliant inventor. He was disciplined, systematic, patient, and utterly relentless. Those traits, not genius, built the empire. He built what others dismissed. He refined what others abandoned. He persisted when others quit. And when the government finally broke his empire apart, his shares made him richer than ever. The story of John D. Rockefeller teaches us that vision without infrastructure is just a dream. Infrastructure without vision is just logistics. The genius is in building both simultaneously. He also shows us that reputation and legacy are long-game plays. The most hated man in America at 60 had rebuilt his public image by 80 and is now remembered as one of the greatest philanthropists in history. His final message to the next generation, in his own words, sow good seeds, be faithful in small things, start saving early, and never stop giving. From a 50-cent a day bookkeeper in Cleveland to the world's first billionaire, the arc of this story defies almost every conventional narrative about how wealth is created in America. It wasn't inheritance. It wasn't luck. It wasn't connections. It was a systematic accumulation of advantages. One deal, one refinery, one pipeline, one company at a time. The world's first billionaire understood something that most people only learn after decades of trying. In business, the goal is never to win the game. The goal is to own the game. Rockefeller didn't just compete in the oil industry. He became the oil industry. And in doing so, he lit the lights, fueled the engines, and built the infrastructure of modern America. Whether you admire him or not, you are living, right now, in a world that John D. Rockefeller built. Every time you fill your tank, every time a cargo ship crosses an ocean, his blueprint is still running. The empire is gone, the man is gone, but the systems he built, the laws his power inspired, and the institutions his wealth created are still shaping your life